Hello and welcome. You're watching NewsX and I'm Megha Sharma. Now there's a big development that has taken place. There was the Global Maritime Summit that was taking place in India for the last 2 days. And we are going to bring much focus to what are going to be the large impacts and implications to this massive port development initiative that has been taken by the government of India. Now the East India Company had travelled far and wide to colonize the world and launch the Industrial Revolution in Europe. It is therefore integral to control the maritime trade for a country to become a manufacturing hub and step up in a level playing field in the global arena. The Prime Minister has announced maritime projects worth 23,000 crore rupees, also giving impetus to the ambitious IMEC by setting up a terminal in Gujarat from where the IMEC journey starts. And all these big developmental projects and foundation stones were laid during the Global Maritime Summit that concluded today. So while there are these domestic ports and terminals that are being set up at a fast pace, there are international collaborations that are happening with a number of Indian companies that are traveling far and wide and setting up ports, whether it is Sri Lanka, whether it is Bangladesh. We took a look at how Adani's had taken control of the Haifa port. They are responsible for the construction of the port over there. We take a look at North Africa, and there have been a number of ports that have been set up by India, by Indian companies. So what is the essence of making all these resources available for our port infrastructure, marine infrastructure to be fortified? Let's start off this conversation. Vice Admiral Shekhar Sinha on the telecast with me. Admiral Sinha, while on one hand it is important for our commercial benefits to have maritime trade in a bid to control the waters, control the ocean economy, on the other it is also strategic importance to have our ports domestically at strategic locations as well as internationally.
Well, namaskar to your viewers, and thank you, Megha, for getting me on your show. You know, this maritime sector, as you rightly said, the British came here. They took the eastern route, they went to Calcutta. It was the maritime trade by which they came to India and developed India into a colony. And unfortunately, thereafter, the progress on the maritime front has been very little. But with the present Prime Minister Modi, from the time he has come into center as a Prime Minister, you will find that his focus has been quite a lot on maritime. His first outing was a meeting on INS Vikramaditya in 2014, where he addressed all the commanders. And thereafter, on a visit to Mauritius, he coined this word Sagar, which is the security and growth for all in the region. It is not for controlling the sea, Megha, as you rightly said. It is for utilizing the power of the sea. We have not exploited it fully. You know, if you stand in the center, we are talking about a diameter of 3,000 kilometers, 1,500 kilometers on either side. And therefore, but our maritime sector, particularly the commercial maritime sector, has not kept pace with the world. So we have to travel quite a lot, which the Prime Minister has realized. And therefore, he is going full speed ahead. 23,000 crores is one small section. You look at the development of ports, the trade will increase, it will create jobs, it will add to prosperity of people. So we are looking at not only trade, but ultimate is job, ultimate is per capita income of every citizen in the country. So right. that is the core.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And obviously, in a bid to be a manufacturing hub, you cannot ignore your maritime strategies. You cannot ignore maritime trade. And in fact, when it comes to the Indian Ocean region and Malacca Strait, that's where maximum amount of trade happens for India. And if we not take control of that, then it all falls flat in terms of our goals to become the third largest economy and amongst the topmost economies of the world, to increase our GDP and become a $30 trillion economy, $40 trillion economy. And as our dreams grow, so do our resources being poured into all these avenues, particularly blue ocean economy, as the Prime Minister calls it. I'm going to bring into focus these, the domestic port power of India. When it comes to showcasing, where are these current ports that have been built? What is their capacity? and which are these projected plans that have been put out, projected ports that have been put out that will allow for our maritime trade to become easier, allow for export import through maritime paths to maritime trade to become easier. It is also going to allow for logistics to help reduce the cost of imports, help reduce the duties on imports to a large scale, and thereby allowing for our manufacturing industry to work on overtime and build capacities on a large scale. So let's take a look at an important port, Mundra port. This is in Gujarat, this is along Arabian Sea, this is India's first private port. This has obviously been the focal point of the government of India, and there has been money that has been pumped, resources that have been pumped on a large scale to develop this port as well. Quickly taking a look at the next port, and this is particularly this is opened in 1998, commenced operations in 2001 as well. So at this point in time, this is a port which is already functional, and there is trade that takes place by way of containers coming over here and carrying goods and services. Deen Dayal Port, Kandla in Gujarat. Now this is India's largest port by volume of cargo handled. Deen Dayal Port is also the port where funds up to the tune of 4,500 crore rupees have been allocated by Prime Minister during this global summit that ended today. This is to create a terminal, and it will also allow for the IMEC corridor, which starts from Gujarat, is going to start from Deen Dayal Port. So therefore, fast-paced development of this port, the terminal is being done. The port of the Prime Minister, like I said, the Prime Minister has laid foundation for a mega container terminal at the Tuna Tekra near Kandla yesterday. Let's take a look at the other ports, and here you have it, the Kochi port, India's first transshipment port. And this is in Kerala, again a very important strategic and commercial port for India. There has in fact been another port that has been set up, which is going to be privately controlled by the Adani group of companies, which is further up along the border of Kerala. Now, what the Kochi port hosts is the largest container transshipment facility in India. Let's quickly take a look at the next few ports. You know, these I'm not picking because there are some dozens and dozens of ports that India at this point of time utilizes, but there are just a few, highlighting just a few top 10 of them which have maximum trade by volume and their strategic importance as well. This is Jawaharlal Nehru Port, second largest container port in India. We also have Port of Chennai, the third oldest port in India. It was founded in 1881. Okay, let's quickly move to the next. It's the largest port in the Bay of Bengal. All right. Let's take a look at the next set of slides. We were also going to take a look at okay, now this is India's first deep water transshipment terminal. This is in Kerala. This is Vizhinjam International Seaport. Now this was just a few days ago in news. This is the port that we were talking about, another one in Kerala. This has been given in private hands of a private company, Adani group of companies, and this is going to be allowing for the largest trade to come from the Indian Ocean region. Quickly moving on. Again, India's first automated terminal is going to be set up once the port is built, once the terminal is built. Okay, and now let's take a look at India's overseas port projects, the collaborations and cooperation that have happened with various countries to set up our ports and terminals over here. And the topmost is the Chabahar port. Chabahar port is India's first overseas port project. It has come into a lot of problems, stagnation that has taken place over several years. This is particularly with regards to how Iran and Russia and India and Afghanistan have not been able to resolve their internal crisis, their regional matters, but nonetheless there has been some movement now that has happened recently when it comes to the development of Chabahar port. It's strategically important for India to build that access to Afghanistan and all the way to Iran and Russia. Now, in July 2022, Adani Ports won the tender to privatize Israel's Haifa port. let's quickly take a look from Chabahar port in Iran. Let's quickly take a look at the next port, which is the Haifa port. Okay. Okay, all right. So let's put out the map of. Okay, all right. So sorry for that. That's not Chabahar. That is actually Haifa. That is along the East Mediterranean Sea, and that's the location pin that you see. That's Haifa. Haifa is a key stop in the India, Middle East, Europe economic corridor. So extremely important, as was released during the G20 summit on the sidelines of the announcement that came out. And then next up is obviously an important port. This is along the Bay of Bengal, Chittagong port. In April 2023, Bangladesh gave India permanent access to the Chittagong port. Let's also take a look at our okay, all right. Again, India uses the Chittagong port for transit and transshipment of cargo to northeast. Let's take a look at the other countries in the subcontinent. Okay, all right. So and besides these, we also have Sri Lanka with stiff competition between India and China. There is also a Colombo port at this point of time that is in control of India. We take a look at Maldives, we take a look at certain countries in North Africa. Horn of Africa is where China has taken control of its ports. So India at this point of time on a competitive streak to allow for its ports and terminals to be built there as well. All right, coming back to my panelists here, and Ambassador Pradeep Kapoor. Now, in terms of the closer picture that I was trying to create for our audience to tell about where the domestic ports, important ones at least, that are marked on the map of India, in the Bay of Bengal, in the Arabian Sea, in the Indian Ocean region, it is also equally important, rather more so, to have collaborations with other friendly countries to set up ports and terminals.
Thank you, Megha. This is a very important discussion which you have initiated. And India was a maritime power in the earlier times. Then slowly we lost that sort of capacity and that interest. It is good that we are now reviving that capacity in a very big way, because having maritime power is a very important part of our overall mix. When you want to become an important country, a country which contributes to the global community in significant ways, to peacekeeping, to becoming an important player, which India is, and is becoming more and more of an important player, accompanied by maritime power, facilitates that leverage. Now, what I see India doing is taking these significant steps. Now, once you have invested, tens of thousands of crores of rupees towards expanding your maritime footprint and letting the world know that you are becoming active again on this scene. It is an important sort of announcement to the world. It's an important statement you're making, and the world will recognize this and appreciate this, particularly at this time when there is so much of disruption and so much of violence and so much of war. And Russia-Ukraine war has been going on for a very long time now. Now you have war erupted in the Middle East between Israel and Palestine, and other countries are stepping in. The US president is currently in Israel today and tomorrow. Iran is making threatening statements. Saudi Arabia is holding meetings. So the amount of disruption which is taking place is phenomenal, absolutely, and including in the maritime domain. Also, the potential for disruption is also very, very phenomenal, because China is making threatening moves against Taiwan, for example, which will involve a very significant amount of maritime activity. They are also disrupting the US movement of naval ships in that area of South China Seas, East China Seas, around the Taiwan Strait also. Also disrupting their air patrolling reconnaissance flights. So for India to step up its posturing and its presence in the maritime domain is strategically very, very important. Trade-wise, of course, you have mentioned that the ancient trade by the East India Company ballooned into something much larger than just trade, into colonization. So we are not going down that path of colonization, but our linkages with all the maritime partners. India has a very significant maritime presence, fortunately, in the sense that we have Andaman Nicobar Islands on one side of the country, on the east side. We have the Lakshadweep, Minicoy Islands on the other side. And some of the islands, unfortunately, were gifted away in the earlier part of our independence. But the islands that we already have extend our reach to the Far East on Southeast Asia on one side, to Africa on the other side, and down we have Sri Lanka and Maldives and other countries. So the reach which India has already is very significant. Now, how do you establish your presence? Because we have been very slow since independence on this maritime front. Fortunately, the government has started moving on it and taking steps which are very significant and very important for our geopolitical presence in the world, and for establishing our presence in a way that our partner countries feel confident that yes, India is going to be there for them, with them, in their difficulties, in their strategic problems, and also in their economic development. So that statement is being made in a very strong manner. The
Yeah.
India Middle East European corridor is a very significant step which was announced
Yeah.
recently at the G20,
Yeah.
and
And
this will add to that
the
effort
fact
also.
that we are flanked by ocean on both sides of our country. The
Three
Indian
sides.
Ocean, you take a look at Arabian Sea on the northeastern side, the Bay of Bengal, again the Indian Ocean region, very strategically important. All the focus when it comes to Quad, obviously throttling the Chinese expansionist agenda, Chinese taking over the maritime trade. Malacca Strait is a cause of concern. Again, building another of these maritime trade links, maritime trade routes for the Indian Ocean, extremely important. But also important is the economic implication, economic advantages that India has already taking, but what more can be done? Rajiv Gupta on the telecast with me. Rajiv, if you could explain to us now, what is the largest maritime trade by volume and by exports that come from the domestic trade, maritime trade that India conducts?
Thank you, Megha. I think, to understand the economy side of it, first we have to understand that the trade worldwide, 90% of the trade happens through maritime. It's basically ships which carry goods to various places. So as simply put, 90% of your trade happens through maritime. Now let's understand that from a historical perspective, right from the Chola dynasty, Gupta dynasty, Chola dynasty, we were actually very good at shipbuilding. We were at that point of time, in comparison with others, having very good shipbuilding facilities. Our ships, when Chinese came, they thought they had wonderful shipbuilding facility, but when they saw the sheer size of Indian ships in the 14th century, they really felt that their own ships were just nothing in front of them. So why I told you this was that economics has always been very closely linked with the maritime capability of a country. I mean, if you really look at it, we used to say that, most of us have heard that at one point of time, India was controlling 30% of the GDP of the world. And that was happening more because at that point of time, in comparison to others, we had a very, very good maritime facility. In the 1650s, when Britain came, they started to kind of put restrictions on imports from Asia, etc. So if you can't export anything, obviously your shipping industry will die. So and that kind of was replaced by Britain, and then of course you can see the rise of Britain.
Yeah.
So even if you go to the Greek civilization, everything has happened in the same way. In our scheme of things, we also have to understand that the logistics cost in this country was about 15-16%, whereas the global average is about 9-10%. So you are more expensive by 5% without even doing anything. So until and unless you have a proper ecosystem of all your routes, which is shipping, highways, railways, airports, all of them in place, you will not be able to get global dominance of trade. So the global dominance will only come when you become competitive, when you are able to price your products at a certain level. So this Sabarmala project, which is 12 coastal economic regions, 12 lakh crores to be done, and all the things that are happening in the maritime industry is a huge step forward for the next 25-30 years. We cannot be the Atmanirbhar and Vishwaguru that we talk about without this industry keeping pace. So, your trade is going to be, suppose you produce a lot of stuff, but you do not have the facilities to export it. So, there will be problem. So, because of all of this, the maritime industry to really take better shape is very, very important.
Yeah, okay.
I think it is brilliant.
Yeah, absolutely. You rightfully mentioned, logistics will come down, slash down to from 15, like you said, to 7 to 9%. Obviously, the major chunk of that funding then can be used for manufacturing purposes, manufacturing hubs, whether it's iron ore, steel. These are as our exports rise, and through the maritime routes that we take is only going to allow for India to build on its GDP on a larger scale. Again, Captain Shyam Kumar also on the telecast with me. He's the Indian Navy warship captain and naval instructor, pilot, defense and strategic expert as well. Now, you've heard it from the rest of the panelists, but the situation at this point of time, it's going to take gestation period as well. You're spending the money, you're putting in billions and millions of dollars into it, but it is going to give you results only after a certain period of time.
So you are right, Megha. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. Any countries maritime might requires three important aspects. That is the shipbuilding capacity. That is the way we produce ships and maintain them for maritime these shipments. Second is the handling capacity, ports and harbors. And thirdly, the strong naval fleet which can protect the shipment at sea so that our maritime routes are secured. In that sense, India is growing by step to come to a level wherein we can also have a say in our economy through the maritime routes, which have been always a requirement for any strong nation. Having said that, today from 1870 of Calcutta port, starting from that to 13 major ports in India and almost 180 minor ports, having Gangavaram as the deepest port of 21 meter, and now at Virinjam, a port of 24 meters draft, where we just welcomed Zhenhua 15 Chinese ship, which arrived with the gantry cranes for the Adani port, which has been made under public-private partnership.
Right.
So these are the development that India is undertaking to come into the level wherein we can catch hold of the blue economy and work upon our maritime routes, our trades that which was historically very strong as brought out by our panelists, and to revive and catch on with the economy so that we get into from fifth place to third place of economy.
Absolutely. Okay, all right. I'm out of time, but we're going to keep a close track, particularly focusing on these individual projects. Sagarmala is one of these biggest initiatives to allow for development of these maritime logistics so as to curb on the other infrastructural road, air, rail transport and bring focus to the maritime resources that are amply in hand of India. I thank my panelists for joining me on the telecast, and thanks for watching.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.